The Mandalorian Season 3 has been out for almost a year, and it was fine. It was okay. The story was okay, the direction was okay, the action was okay, the music was okay. Actually, I take that back. The music was really good. While I did find the season's conclusion kinda lukewarm, there was one thing I thought was truly exceptional, and it was the use of one specific character. Someone who I was always kind of indifferent about, but I'm honestly so happy they were given the spotlight for once, regardless of the expense of other characters like Din or Grogu. So, let's talk about Paz Vizsla. Oh wait, it says Bo-Katan. We're talking about Bo-Katan, not Paz Vizsla. Bo-Katan has always been a super interesting character to me. As a kid, when I watched Clone Wars, I never really paid her any mind. I thought she was pretty cool, her design was awesome, Katie Sackhoff gave a really good performance, but I never thought she was amazing like other people thought. Then again, as a child, I really could take or leave anyone who wasn't R2-D2. Regardless of my 11-year-old opinion, Bo still made an impact on people who did watch the show. And 5 years later, Star Wars Rebels drops in and reintroduces Bo-Katan. The promotional material built up to her having a huge role. It looked like she and Sabine were going to have an interesting relationship, considering Sabine had the Darksaber in this time and was leader of Mandalore. So let's just say at this point, I was hooked. But in true Rebels fashion, the show completely fumbles not only Bo's story arc, but all of Mandalore's. Bo doesn't really do much in the episodes that she's in. It's mainly about Sabine and her arc, which is fine. That is totally understandable, and I'm completely okay with the focal point being on a main character. That's screenwriting 101, and every story should be about its main character. Side characters should not take over a show, even if it is thematically appropriate. Get it? Because of the... Never mind. The issue lies with the fact that we're told how important Bo-Katan is to this story, but she doesn't really do much. Like, she swoops in to help Sabine, she stands in the background, doesn't do much, and then gets the Darksaber at the end. It is very underwhelming. In a vacuum, I think the scene of Bo getting the Darksaber is great, but the issue is that within the episode, there isn't a lot of build-up because we've spent almost no time on her character. We briefly delve into her background with Satine and how she was an extremist, but it's never given the time of day. We don't get enough time to really stomach Bo's freedom fighters, what she's been doing all these years, how she's coped with her sister's death, and why she's so angry with the Empire governing Mandalore. I know that the obvious answer is that the Empire is evil, they don't want to be governed by a higher power, but there are other Mandalorians who are perfectly fine with the Empire ruling Mandalore. Gar Saxon and Bo-Katan never share any scenes together, and I think it would have been really interesting to let these characters talk more about their political standpoints. While I have my issues with Bo's portrayal, I will say I love her getting the Darksaber and uniting Mandalore to rebel against the Empire. The stage has been set for a really exciting climax with the liberation of Mandalore, and Bo leading it, and I was so excited to see where it goes, and then Rebels immediately drops the storyline.
You guys have officially made me lose my marbles!
The show literally ends this story arc right when it was getting good. All of this focus on Mandalore just to drop it is quite frankly hilarious. Mandalore is never even mentioned again after this episode. The show just focuses on other stuff with Ezra. Why was all of this time spent on developing Bo-Katan when she was never going to have an importance to the overall story? Let's just say I was a little disappointed with how Rebels wrapped up this lackluster arc. This cliffhanger was just something a future story would have to tell in the indefinite future. And then something special happened. The Clone Wars got one more season to wrap up its story arc with the Siege of Mandalore, which of course meant Bo-Katan in her prime. And honestly, this season fixes a lot of issues I had with her in Rebels. Her relationship with her sister is fleshed out immensely. Seeing her disgruntled over Obi-Wan turning his back on her after Maul murdered the love of his life, and Bo's sister is really emotional, and multiple scenes are dedicated to her wanting to live up to Satine.
You were never the politician your sister was.
We also get more insight on Bo wanting to rule her people. It makes her suddenly wanting to rule the planet in Rebels a bit more believable and organic. And after that, most of my issues with Bo were completely gone. Her past was fully explored, so all that was left was her future. Unfortunately, it didn't look like Star Wars Animation was going to be continuing her story anytime soon. Bad Batch was the only show in development at the time, and it had nothing to do with Mandalore, and a follow-up to Rebels wasn't even considered at that point in time. Live action looked like it was going to be the future of Star Wars, and animation, along with its unfinished arcs, we're gonna unfortunately have to wait for shows like The Mandalorian to tell its own disconnected story. At least, that's what I thought.
No!
Never have I considered that animated characters would be brought into live action. It just seemed unrealistic. Yet The Mandalorian brought not one, but two characters from Star Wars animation into its second season, one of which being Bo-Katan herself, being played by her original voice actress Katie Sackhoff. Everything about this character said it was great. The action had that fast-paced Clone Wars flair, Sackhoff's performance was completely consistent with her animated portrayal, and the costume was just outstanding. Though that comes with a little asterisk above it, because the wig that they gave this lady is shockingly terrible. Aside from that minor nitpick, Bo's transition into live action is perfect. Her story at this point is that essentially after she rallied the Mandalorians and Rebels, their revolution immediately backfired and resulted in Mandalore's destruction, killing most of their warriors and the entire populace, and Bo lost the Darksaber to the one responsible for Mandalore being glassed, Moff Gideon of the Imperial Security Bureau. After the Purge, she's been rallying as many remaining Mandalorians as she can to find Gideon, kill him, and get the Darksaber back. It's clear at this point that Bo-Katan is far more level-headed and confident compared to when she was aggressive and overly outspoken in the Clone Wars. As someone who started out hating unpure Mandalorians who had no right to the throne, she's friendly and looks out for Din Djarin, who's a Mandalorian that isn't pure and born from a long line of Mandalorians. She still has that familiar snarkiness and even uses Din's creed against him to get him to fulfill his end of the deal when he's clearly uncomfortable working alongside her. It's still clearly a step in the right direction. However, all this is completely brought to a head when Gideon confronts the team and Din Djarin is the one to defeat him, not Bo-Katan. Since Din beat Gideon in combat, he is now the owner of the Darksaber, and the only way for Bo to win it is to beat Din Djarin in combat. And Din can't just fudge the story and yield to her, because in Mandalorian culture, what gives the sword its power is how a Mandalorian earns it. Being gifted the sword isn't the right way to get the Darksaber. It has to be won in combat through some sort of ordeal. This is funnily enough a backhanded solution to how sudden and unearned Bo getting the Darksaber was in Rebels. The moment itself is great, but the build-up could have used more work in my opinion, so Gideon essentially dropping the bomb that not only in the narrative, but in universe, Bo didn't earn the Darksaber is not only a good payoff, but kind of hilarious to me. In all seriousness, I also think that this moment sheds a light on Bo and her coming to realize how her story doesn't warrant her being the leader of Mandalore. If the story is what gives you power, then her story doesn't warrant having power at all, because all she's done in her life is try to usurp her sister, help bring Darth Maul back to power, only for him to betray her, kill Satine, which caused a domino effect of Mandalore splitting into warring factions, paving the way for the Empire to take control and bomb the planet anyway. I think this moment is Bo realizing her whole story has been a curse on her people, and she shouldn't even get the Darksaber from Din because by all accounts, he deserves it more than her. So in the end, she just gives up. She goes back home, her loyalists all leave her behind, and she hides. I think this bit of Bo's character could have been focused on a lot more, but I think this explains how defeated and pessimistic she is in the beginning of Season 3. People have all asked why Bo would suddenly give up after trying to get her honor back for years, but I think this coming to a realization that you were the problem would dampen your self-esteem. So Bo hides away in her little castle, and Din eventually comes back to ask her for help on a random mission, and Bo refuses. She calls Din a cult member and openly mocks him again, progressing her character back to who she was in Clone Wars, someone who hated outsiders trying to be Mandalorians. I don't call this regression in the sense that it's bad writing. This is Bo purposefully giving up and trying to be more honorable and a leader, so she shuts down and chooses to insult her allies. People make the wrong choices when they're upset, and Bo definitely resents Din a little bit for unintentionally usurping her and causing her to spiral into depression. But none of that matters because after Din leaves, he gets kidnapped by a xenomorph and Baby Yoda asks Bo to help save his dad. This is honestly one of my favorite moments for Bo because after all she's been through, and regardless of how much she envies Din's position in getting the Darksaber, she still chooses to help him. She doesn't care at the end of the day that he may be better than her. She still chooses to help him and Grogu because it's the right thing to do. Deep down, Bo is still a good person, no matter how rough her exterior is. She even treats Grogu like a little nephew and protects him like it's truly in her nature. Small moments like this show me that Bo's actions speak louder than any little petty insult to Din's creed. So now it's time for the action. Bo fights the Mythosaur and uses the Darksaber to kill him in his weird spider mech thing. Not even knowing it, Bo defeated the enemy that defeated Din, making her the true owner of the Darksaber. And while I'm not the biggest fan of this loophole since it's kind of convenient and somewhat unearned, I do like what it says about Bo's character. Bo is so uncaring of the Darksaber at this point, and all she cares about is Din's safety, where she completely forgets about the sword's significance, and doesn't even realize she won it. She glossed over it because that wasn't what she was focused on. She was really focused on her friend, and didn't care in that moment in life, and it's a display of her character. Her past was misguided, but here, she cares for her friends and will do anything to help them, even if it's the life of someone she isn't on the best terms with. So Din and Bo go home, but oh no, Bo's home was bombed in a TIE fighter drive-by. So Din invites Bo to go out with her cult for a bit, and while I think this was kind of random at first, I think it was meant to give a hint of tragedy to this point in Bo's life. She doesn't really have that much of a choice to stay with them. She's lost everything. If she said no to not wanting to stay with the cult, where exactly was she gonna go? She just lost her home, her friends are gone, she has quite literally nothing and no one. She kinda had to stay, so she's unfortunately forced into this position of participating in a cult that she's mocked since her youth. It's a very you don't know a person until you run a mile in their shoes kind of shtick. So Bo hangs out with Din Cult and warns up to them, and the armor eventually reveals that Bo is destined to be the leader of Mandalore, because even if she doesn't abide by their beliefs, she has now walked the way of their cult and a normal Mandalorian, meaning she's capable of bringing both of these eras of their culture together. This isn't just a great moment for the armorer who learns to open up and embrace other aspects of Mandalorian culture outside of her cult, but also for Bo, since now it shows that she's opened up to other aspects of Mandalorian culture as well, giving the armorer the chance to see that maybe Mandalorians should join together. Once the two sides got to look at the other's perspective, they finally got to understand. So Bo tracks down her old group of loyalists, and they refuse to come with her because she still doesn't have the Darksaber. But Din reveals that she already earned it because she fought the Xenomorph. Now, a lot of people have an issue with how Bo earned the Darksaber through some odd loophole, and if it were up to me personally, I would have preferred it be done differently too. However, I do like that Din gives it to her out of an act of friendship. He spent so much time with her that he finally trusts her and believes her loyalty and character shows. When he first offered the sword to her, it was out of obligation. He didn't want anything to do with it. Now he's giving it to her because he genuinely loves her and thinks she's worthy of it. I firmly believe that the loophole is more so meant to serve as Din saying that she won it by trying to save someone she cared about, and not by wanting the sword itself. Bo could have theoretically just walked away with the Darksaber after killing the robot, because by all accounts, she technically won it, but she gave it back to Din and helped him. Here we finally get to see Bo shed her selfish past and embrace what she's meant to be, a leader who won the loyalty of someone she would have mocked years ago. Think about who's saying what in this scene.
A misguided zealot possesses the blade. One, I might add, who has not one drop of Mandalorian blood in his veins.
Din Djarin took the creed and chose to walk the way, just as our ancestors did. He is every bit the Mandalorian that they were, certainly as much as any of us.
Bo is defending a Mandalorian who isn't technically from a pure bloodline. If this was her a few decades ago, she would have mocked him like she did with Darth Maul.
No outsider will ever rule Mandalore.
If you will not join me, you will all die.
Here she's choosing to stand by him because she's grown. So the Mandalorians all go back to Mandalore, which has been turned into Los Puernos Hermana by Gus Fring, but Bo immediately loses the Darksaber to him and it's destroyed. And by all accounts, Bo once again failed to prove she's an adequate leader. However, Din comes to the rescue with Baby Yoda, and the three of them all help kill Gideon together. Bo didn't need the Darksaber all along because it's shown that her expertise came from seeing the perspective of other Mandalorians. She still managed to beat Gideon, but not with the sword. She did it with her friends, because that's what truly matters at the end of the day. That's what Bo is good at, having loyalty and character. You don't need a sword to be powerful and strong. Yeah, as far as Bo-Katan's story goes, I'm really happy with how it turned out. As far as the future of her character, I'm not sure what's next for her. I do hope the focus shifts back to Din Djarin in Season 4, and while I do wish he had more screen time in Season 3, I don't think he was wasted. He had a good relationship with Bo, and their growth and learning to respect one another felt earned at the end of the day. But please give him something to do next season. The show's called The Mandalorian. He is the Mandalorian. But I would be totally fine seeing her pop up now and again. She's probably going to be in that Thrawn movie and help save the day at the end, so that'll be cool. But for now, I'm perfectly happy not seeing this character again for a while, because she got her happy ending.